Okay. Leil Shabbos, Velel Yom Tiv, Mevorchim Usofrim Achar Kiddush Beis HaKnesses. We do the Sefira after Kiddush and Beis HaKnesses. We don't do that, Kiddush and Beis HaKnesses. U'Motzei Shabbos Yom Tov Kaidem Havdalah. We do it before Havdalah. So in both cases, we do it into the Shabbos. You know, on Erev Shabbos you do it before Kiddush, and here you do it before Havdalah. After Shabbos, right? After Kiddush, you're doing it, more into Shabbos. Right. But okay. Kaidem Havdalah, Achar Kaddish Tiskabel. Ukeshechol Yom Tov Achron Shel Pesach B'Motzei Shabbos, and when Yom Tov Achron of Pesach comes out on Motzei Shabbos, Oz Omer Kiddush V'Havdalah B'Vas Achas. Yesh Lismor Kaidem Shemevorchim Halachos B'Beis HaKnesses. Then you do it beforehand. V'mein Lo Yayin Tzarech LeKaddish Yak Nahaz. Okay, now let's see this Mishnah Berurah. Shakoma shenuchol lahaktim kedushas hayom yesh lanu lahaktim. We have to do it as early as we can. Vim sofer beveisoy yisper kaidem kiddush kaidem yisper kaidem kiddush da osa lechol kaidem sfira. You have to do it before you eat. Kaidem havdalah da fuke yama machrinon komada efshar. Even though there's a din of Tmimus that you should really be counting Sefira earlier, but we don't want to get rid of Shabbos, and that supersedes. Okay? I just would like to share with you a fascinating chakira, which I was a little bit involved in about a year ago. After davening, I'm quoting from all the Rishonim, after davening we say Aleinu. Is Aleinu the last part of davening, or is Aleinu the thing that we do after davening? What are you laughing about? Okay, but I will just tell you, I'm going to give you a piece of history, and when you know this piece of history, the question becomes much... You mean Risite, you mean Chassidim, right?
Friday do it after the final Kaddish.
Aleinu.
After the final Kaddish. Everyone else does Kaddish after Aleinu.
Okay, but all right. Well, just share with you the source of Aleinu was the one who invented Tfilas Aleinu was Yeshua when he went into Eretz Yisrael, and the idea behind it was that when we were in the Midbar, we lived on mun, which, being that today is probably in Los Angeles, it's still Lag BaOmer. So just share with you that the Chassam Sofer in Tshuva says that the mun fell the first time on Yud Ches Iyar, which is there's three different dates that either was Tezvav, Tezayin, or Yud Zayin Iyar, different dates that are brought down when the mun fell, and that is when Klal Yisrael finished their exodus from Mitzrayim. Until then they were living on the remnants of the matzah that they had, and from then they became the nation that's living on Nisim. They lived on mun, which we call it living on Nisim. They finished living on Nisim when they went into Eretz Yisrael, and Yeshua made this tefillah as a introduction to living on Teva. In other words, this is so after a person finishes davening, so they're going into Teva, so there's a tefillah which is appropriated for that purpose. When you leave the sphere of Kedusha, going into the sphere of Olam Hazeh, I don't know what we want to call it exactly, so therefore we have this tefillah. So the question is, was this said as an introduction to the work, or was this said as a end of the tefillah? You understand? That makes more sense. The chakira, and there are different Makairis that seem to say different ways, but I'm just pointing out that Aleinu is a very important thing, but that's called after davening.
Why do Ashkenazim do Shir Shalom after?
I just want to tell you something. You asked a question which bothers me greatly. When probably about 7 or 8 years after I was the Rav of this shul, I decided to, like, the shul has some kind of strange minhagim, and those minhagim come from the fact that this shul, when it was originally founded, it was founded as Sfard, and then it switched to being Ashkenaz, and not everything switched 100%. When I was involved in my tenure in researching the things, the only thing that I left the way that it was on Shabbos that we say the Yom after Shachris. Now, why is that? I don't think so. Now, why is that? The reason why is because the Yom has to do with the Korban Tamid. It doesn't have to do with the Korban Musaf. So, why would you say the Yom after Musaf? You should be saying it in the place where it's, where it's shaykh to the Tamid. Now, the Tzitz Eliezer, he has a long piece to explain possibly why it was done where it was done. And, that's just a fascinating piece of, different minhagim come to different places.
That would be the reason. And when they say the Hashem Olim, it should have been said in Musaf instead of saying it in Shachris right after Shishon Yom. Right?
Well, I'm not going to argue with you, but why should that be?
I mean, it's just more convenient, of course, to do it right after.
No, I'm just asking you a question.
Why? Because you're saying that it's connected more, not Shachris, and not really connected to Musaf. So therefore, the Rosh Hashanah should be the last thing that's said, and that it would be the end of Musaf.
Why?
Huh?
What does that have to do with Musaf?
That's not anything to do with Musaf.
Theoretically, we could daven Shachris and go home, come back, do Musaf and Mincha, and everything will be fine, right? Musaf has nothing to do with Shachris.
Correct. It's its own tefillah.
Right? So where should you put L'David?
You should put it generally after Musaf.
Why?
It's the end of davening. Oh, you say the end of davening.
It's the end of what? I'm going home. It's the time before you're going home, but it has nothing to do with the end of davening.
It's not an end, it's an addition.
But you don't say the whole year.
Right.
You don't say the whole year. Therefore, then why does it follow after the Shir Shal Yom as opposed to finishing after you? I
want to just share with you some place where you'll see that that your thought process exists. Minig Ashkenaz, we say L'David after Ma'ariv. Sfard, they say it after Mincha. Everybody agrees it should really be said after Mincha. The reason why we say it after Ma'ariv is because for hundreds of years we daven Mincha Ma'ariv, right? I don't know. That's one word. That's right. Yeah. So they deferred it till the end of davening, but be'etzem it's supposed to be said after Mincha. Okay, so that. Okay, fine.
No.
All right.
Why wouldn't it be said both in Mincha and Ma'ariv? That's what I didn't understand. Why was it only said now in Ma'ariv and not even in Mincha?
I would just say that probably the answer to that is that Ma'ariv is a Tfilas Rishus. So we don't usually add things to something which the whole thing itself is I don't want to say we're questionable. I don't mean that it's questionable, but it's not as strong a chiyuv as Shachris and Mincha. Okay. Okay. Shvi shel Pesach never falls out on Motzei Shabbos. V'lo sheni shel Pesach ein mekadshim beis hakneses k'mo shekosem siman tov pei zayin, because there's nobody there. Okay. Yesh lispor kaidem dafuke yoma machrina kamo defsha. We always push off getting rid of Shabbos. V'avagav shemakabel hochel kedushas yom tov b'kiddushay. It's not like you're going from Shabbos into a weekday, you're going from Shabbos into a Yontif, but still, Mikol Mokam, Kedusha Shabbos, Gedolim, Kedusha Yontif, and it's called a step down. V'das hataz, the lav davka Mchal Yontif Achron B'Motzei Shabbos, tu adir Mchal Nami, Imchol Nami yesh lahaktim sfir lekiddush ditvei adif laacher kedushas yom hashvi shu min haTorah milakabel kedushas yom tov achron she'eino ela midrabanon. Okay, that the question is, which one is a stronger kedusha? And the Taz says one way, although the Pasuk can say the other way. Okay, that's basically the end of halachas of Sefira. I guess we'll learn the halacha of Chodesh, because I say always, this is, it's now or never. Just being that we're standing in the day that we're standing, today is called Lag BaOmer, let's just say today's Lag BaOmer, there's a question of why is it called the carbon Omer? Okay? No, it's the Omer is the measurement. That's not the carbon, right? So why is it called the carbon Omer? And the answer to this question is probably found in Parshas B'Shalach, when we speak about the Omer's Asir Sa'efa, right? So when we discuss the Omer, we're discussing the amount. And the reason why we're discussing this amount has to do with that which I mentioned beforehand, the idea of the preparation for Kabbalah HaTorah has to do with how much we are involved in our Olam Hazeh. And this is, the Omer was a carbon of Sa'irin. It was a carbon of Michael Behema. And this is basically the crudest of foods that you can have. This is the most earthly, I don't know what the word to use, but Magushim, this is the most, I don't know what the word I'm supposed to be using over here is. Coarse, yeah, that's probably the word I should be using. The most coarse of foods, and that is the carbon Omer. And we're discussing the idea of this measurement of how a person in his parnasa, echad amarba v'echad amamit, you ended up with the same Omer, because our parnasa doesn't depend on how much we overexert ourselves. We get what we're supposed to get. And that's part of the reason why it's done like that. And we don't eat from any of the new grains until after the carbon Omer, which was brought. And the carbon Omer was brought on the 16th day of Nisan. Now, the 16th day of Nisan is called in the Gemara Yom Hanaf, right? Which means the day that they waved. What did they wave? The carbon Omer, you were right? That symbolizes the person's hishtadlis for parnasa. You're busy waving everything around. It's the same Omer that's there the whole time. It's just you're moving it around and you're being involved in your parnasa. The Omer actually has something very strongly related to a person's parnasa, and this actually is something which is a prep for Kabbalah HaTorah. Also lechol min hachodesh, af bizman hazeh, bein lechem, bein koli, bein carmel, no matter how the wheat was processed, atchilas lel yudches b'nisan. Ube'eretz Yisrael, atchilas lel yudzayin nisan. In other words, you have to wait for the day for it to be over. I'll just, at this point, going back to Sefiras HaOmer, want to share with you, there is a Sharitzian which we didn't learn, and I would like to learn it right now. Sharitzian in Mem Zayin. And this has to do with a person who forgot to count at night and he counted in the day, that you can continue counting with a bracha. I'd like to read the Sharitzian because this Sharitzian is a fascinating idea. Mem Gimel. Bahag behilchos atzeres v'chem mashmos Rambam the pasuk the niksar bayoim kosher. If a person cut the Omer in the daytime, it's kosher. V'yadua derachmana tal yesvira b'ksira. The Torah said the mitzvah of Sefiras HaOmer is totally in the Ksira. Why? Because it says in the pasuk, Mehochel chermesh bakoma tochel lispor. Right? From the time that you cut the, that's when you should be counting. So if you can cut it in the daytime, so then Sefira should be good in the daytime too. Okay? Yesh litchos the Gemara shekasu atayzis megillah sham. The afilu nemer the ksira by yom kosher l'svira beinan tvimas dafka. For counting, you need tvimas dafka. Ve'efsher zezel kavanas hamagen Avrohom b'sifkat yud gimel. Ve'ein tzorach la'agos ha'machzah shekel. Now the Magen Avrohom b'sifkat yud gimel says something which it's like a 3-word Magen Avrohom, which makes absolutely no sense. It's not coming to me the exact words what the Magen Avrohom says, but the Magen Avrohom says something like, and this is the Mishnah Yankiv discusses this issue. It could be there's 2 mitzvahs. There's a mitzvah to cut the omer, and there's a mitzvah to bring the korban omer. 2 different mitzvahs. It's all part of the same process, but it's 2 different mitzvahs. And there is a strong side to say that halacha l'maisa, if you didn't cut the omer at night, you're not makayim the mitzvah of ksiras omer, but you can still bring the omer. It's missing that mitzvah. Right? There's 2 mitzvahs. You have to cut the omer, and then you have to bring the korban omer. Let's say you cut the omer in the daytime. It doesn't say by the fact that you're supposed to cut it at night that if you cut it in the day that it's puzzle. It could be that if you cut it at the end of the day, you could bring the korban omer, but you weren't makayim the mitzvah of ksiras omer. The question is if these 2 things go together, and this is the Mishnah Yankiv has a whole tshuva on this subject, and that has to do with this idea of sfira bayom, if it's called a sfira or not. Most poskim say that if you can bring it, it's the mitzvah is to cut it only at night, and if you missed cutting it at night, then you're out of business. But there are those who seem to say that you can still cut it in the day and bring the korban omer. It's just a fascinating Sefiras HaOmer.
They hold it at night and you were never master.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, if you didn't, just like today, what happens today? The day is over. Then it's.
Well, now we don't have it, but someone they actually have.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's what would happen. You didn't bring the omer.
People all over were just by midday or something. They would.
Yeah. I would assume that I would imagine that they never missed. If you really want to know, but that's the subject in the posting. Okay, now also lecho, as it says in the memhei in the Mishnah Berurah, af bizman hazeh. Why is this nogea b'zman hazeh? It says lechol kol v'kol lo yisachlu ad etzem hayoyim hazeh b'chol moshosechem. Mashmi zeh da'af b'chutz la'aretz noyeg isers ad etzem hayom. Even today, da'hainu yoyim havo as a korban shu tezayin b'nisim mishum sveika d'yoyim machmirin le'od yoyim v'hinei b'yiradeisim and reish tzad gimel kosav ramah lahater lechodosh da'ave sveik sveika. To sveik sveika. Now this is from the most complicated subjects in Yeridea. What's the sveik sveika? A sveik sveika means you have a suffix in a suffix. I didn't say you have 2 sveikas. I said you have a suffix within a suffix. It's machlokes rishonim what sveik sveika means exactly. Chada shema tvua hi mishana she'avra. Maybe the tvua that you have is from last year. V'imtim tzolaimer mishana zu dilma nishra shal koydem la'omer. It's from before the omer. Maybe it's from a place that it's mutter. And the Achronim wrote as follows: the Medinas Poland ain't lahakel. There's no heter if you live in Poland. Ki ein chitim b'shufim. There is no chitim b'shufim. The rubadur. What? Ki'em came b'chitim b'shufin the ruba deruan nizroim b'chodesh cheshvan ve'ein shaykh b'hem chodosh, and it's not, they can't have it im lo she'yadu she'nizru b'kayitz, so they are always problematic. Aval sa'ir m'shibol ha'shul v'kusmen ruban k'makulam nizrom achar ha'pesach v'gam ein rogel lahavi sham tvu mimidinos acheres. So therefore it's vadai all vade al chodesh, and it's ein lahaka b'hem. What? Yeah, right. Okay. It has to be.
Work good and work good.
Yeah. Okay.
They're not. Keeping shipping are not a problem because
Yeah.
it's winter.
Okay. Okay. Mikol mokom roiva oilam ein isharim klal be'isur chodesh. L'maisa, even though this is like a mitzvah din d'oraisa, people are not makbid on this. Why? V'yesh shalom d'aleim schus lefishu davar kasher liyazar b'azeh. I'm just going to share with you a story. There's a sefer called Makal Yaakov on Masechtes Makis, and the mechaber of this sefer learned in Panovich by Rabitzel Panovich. Rabitzel Panovich is not the Panovich Rav that you're all familiar with. A fellow you're familiar with is called Shlomo Yosef Kahanaman, and he was the last Rav in Panovich. But Rabitzel Panovich, his name was Rabinowitz, and he was about 75 years beforehand. And he was like the big Pesach in his time. And the fellow who wrote this sefer was a Talmud of Slobodka, and he ended up being in Panovich. And when the Panovich Rav used to go on rabbinical meetings or conventions, so his job was, he was to sit and answer all the questions that was there. And then when the Panovich Rav would come back, he would ask him all the questions and what he answered, and that's how he got his shimush, so to speak. And he said the Panovich Rav went to Petersburg for some convention, and when he came back, he walks into the house and he barks at his wife, "Get me food." And like very odd. And then he ate some food. After he ate some food, so this fellow asked him, "What was that bark about? Why are you so hungry?" So he said, "I was in Petersburg, and I'm makbid on Chodosh, and I didn't have anything to eat for 2 weeks. So for 2 weeks, he was gluten-free, I guess that's what we call him, right? And I didn't have anything to eat, so I was starving. So I told my wife to give me something to eat." Now this is the part of the story. All this is that's a nice story. So he asked the Panovich Rav, what did all the other Gedolim do? You know, you went to this rabbinical convention, so what did everybody else do? So he said everybody else there was not makbid on Chodesh, except for two people. One was Reb Chaim Brisker, and Reb Chaim Brisker had an arrangement with a lady who lived in Petersburg always to keep wheat for him for when he comes. What? I have no idea.
I think he was one of them.
And the other person was the Or Sameach, and the Or Sameach was only makbid on Chodesh when he was in his hometown. So he said, so I was the only one there with nothing to eat. So I'm just sharing with you the facts of yesteryear. So you want to know how common was it for people to be machmer? The answer was no one was machmer. I would just like to share with you a fact about nowadays, which I believe this fact is very important and an unknown fact. There are people nowadays who say, well, it's no problem. We use the dates and we know. That is 100% wrong. The dates only tell you that you know that if it's from before those dates, that there's no question. But it doesn't tell you that if you have it from afterwards, what it is. It doesn't mean that anything from after that production date, that it's Vaday Chodosh. It doesn't mean that. That's just the date when Chodosh was allowed onto the market. What's in the food that you're eating, it's not telling you one way or the other. So it's not a Vaday that nowadays you can track it. Now there's a way that you can be sure that you're not having a problem, but there's no way of knowing what you're eating.
In America, there's a website. Yes.
There's no. I'm talking. That's what I'm talking about.
Manufacture date.
What does it mean? I'm telling you what that means. If that
I just heard a thing about it.
Okay, I don't know. I read it every year, and that's what it says. That's when
it's the dates for types of.
They give you the dates from when those produce, the new produce, can get to the market. And anything which is dated after that, they say don't use.
Oh, so I'm referring more to like Cheerios from this date.
Yeah, if was in October. I know, I'm very familiar, and I'm telling you, it doesn't say what is in that thing. Now, I would just like to share with you some of the disasters that happened about 20 years ago. One of the big bakeries in Brooklyn that was makbid on Chodesh, after Purim, all of their challahs was full of worms because they were using old wheat, and it got full of worms. Okay, so I'm just saying it's not so easy to be makbid on this either. Just saying you have to be aware of it. But by and large, people in America are samech on the dates, and you samech on the dates, you'll have no problem. Yeah, you checked it out? What does it say?
No. An alarm going off.
Okay, that's nothing to do with me. Okay.
All this, of course, is all relevant for Chutz La'aretz. Israel.
I want to tell you something.
No, there's no heter in Israel.
I want to tell you something. When I'm talking at least 25 years ago, I looked into this, and this is very negeya. This question that you're referring to is very negeya. I assume everybody here does everything like Minhag Eretz Yisrael. You know, people, when I was in Chutz La'aretz, I used to wear tefillin on Chalamoid. I don't wear tefillin on Chalamoid anymore. You know, all minhagim that I did in Chutz La'aretz, I more or less dropped, and I accepted the minhagim that are in Eretz Yisrael. That's, I think, most of society does. No, you were still tefillin? Okay, but that's not the accepted opinion. And you eat regular meat. You're not worried about the shita satur. The davening that's done in Eretz Yisrael is not like in Chutz La'aretz. Chutz La'aretz, they were much more machmer. I'm saying, there's a lot of things that you have to be makbid on.
The difference between Aleinu and Kodesh Baruch Hu, the meat is also, that's kind of province of a wife, isn't it? I don't interfere with her.
Okay, it's the question of what to eat, right? I'll just tell you, if I'm not mistaken, I think that tongue in this country, they don't do any davening on it, and in Chutz La'aretz they do. They're different things. All right, anyways.
It's a big machlokas, the idea of Minhag Eretz Yisrael. Like, for example, it's famous Rabbi Avrohom holds everyone should keep the Minhag of the Sephardim here.
That's wonderful.
Even Ashkenazim.
We're very familiar with this. Yeah. It's not him. This is way before his grandfather was born. Yeah. He said it's based on the fact he say kama bottle, but even that I don't think is true today because people have came to Eretz Yisrael as groups and have set aside their own communities. I would just say on that thought, the Brisker Rav said he's very thankful to the Ger Rebbe because the Ger Rebbe didn't put on the Yerushalayim Levush. And he said if he would have put on the Yerushalayim Levush, I would have had to also. So, there are people who dodged the picket lines already long ago. All right. Anyways,
many groups have their own minhagim.
Right, and that's the Mishnah Berurah. Right. Okay. Anyways. What? No, I'm just saying that this is. Okay. So when I looked into it, I'm gonna tell you. They say over from Rabbi Yasha, this is very important. People like myself, I go to America probably once every 2 or 3 years. I don't know, I go to America, and I was not brought up being makbid on Chodesh, so I Batsim wouldn't necessarily be makbid on Chodesh if I went back to America. But being that I am here in Eretz Yisrael, and I've accepted on myself Minhag Eretz Yisrael, if Minhag Eretz Yisrael is that you have to be makbid on Chodesh, I have no choice. When I go to Chutz La'aretz, I have to be machmer. Yeah.
One group of people that certainly don't have to be makbid. Because the bells of Hasidim, they follow the Bach in all the Yomim. So the Rav said, if you part of that Hasidus were educated in Belz institutions, you have to follow the Bach as well as he holds it.
This is, you understand, you missed the point. This is not a halachic discussion. If a person is a Belzer Chassid, and then he decided to become a Gera Chassid, whatever minhagim bells he had, they go into the garbage, and he takes on all minhagim ger, right? That's the halacha of a person who left one community, went to a different community. If the halacha, this is not a halachic question, this is a question of the community that you live in, did they accept it upon themselves? Now, it could be that bells, as a community, never accepted anything upon themselves and live as they did. But you'd have to be a Belzer Chassid living and going to their institutions to do that. My Chassidish Bel's a friend who happens to wear a gartel, and that's about all that he has to do with being a Belzer Chassid. That wouldn't help him. You understand? Okay, but at any rate, this Nakuda, so a person goes back to America would have to be Makbid on Chodesh. What? No, because but that was he accepted the chumrah on himself. Here, this is forced upon you. Right, it's because I live in Eretz Yisrael, so I have to be machmer. So even when I'm going to go to right, okay. Because if you are a better Eretz Yisrael, then it's for and the minhag in Eretz Yisrael is you have to be makbid chodesh. Then you have to be makbid everywhere. Well, it's a similar kind of thing. Okay, I'll just tell you. That's what Rabbi Yashiv holds. Now, there's a sefer on Minhagi Eretz Yisrael called Minhagi Eretz Yisrael, written by somebody named Gelis, which was written before Rabbi Yashiv was on the map, and he discusses the issue, and he says there is no Minhagi Eretz Yisrael on the subject. Why? The reason. Well, after you'll hear why there's no minhag, you'll understand why the halacha is irrelevant. The wheat that grows in Eretz Yisrael always was planted before Pesach, and it was nishrash before Pesach, and it was harvested by Shavuos time. So they never had a question. They didn't have winter wheat, so they didn't have a shiloh. There's nothing that grows at that time in this country. Everything that they have is grown in that, and they don't have an issue. So he says there is no minhag. Now I'll just tell you from my research at that time. I did research. The Rabbanut will not give a hechsher on something that has a chash of chodesh in it. However, they do rubber stamp things like from the OU or things like that have a hechsher from Chutz La'aretz that they consider a reliable hechsher, and they'll be ma'asher that hechsher even though it's a problem of chodesh. Okay? Now, after having said that, I just want to tell you a story that I remember. I remember about 40 years ago that the Bedats made pretzels, and after production they found out that there was a problem of chodesh in the pretzels that they distributed, and they didn't make a recall. This happened more than once. So, which tends to make me believe that it's not a minhag that they hold that Medina. And I want to make a statement over here, which is probably also true. My great-grandparents, as your great-grandparents, I assume did not eat chalak, right? Because that's not what people ate. I would imagine everybody over here eats chalak. Why? Okay. So now, if somebody's going to say, "Are you makbid on chalak?" Is that the minhag in Eretz Yisrael to be makbid on chalak? Well, I'm saying in our community, I would say that everybody, but I don't think that it's true because we don't have non-chalak that we're willing to rely on. In other words, we don't have the option. And I believe that this is true also. If you go to Borough Park, I don't think that there's a pizza shop that's not makbid on chodesh, right? Right. And the reason why is because it sells.
It's up until very recently.
No, I'm just saying that these are things.
I thought Chodesh was everyone held in Eretz Yisrael. It's in Chutz La'aretz it's a machlokas.
Well, that's that's the next line in the Mishnah Berurah. Whether it is but it's not according to everybody. And the subject we're discussing is if you're not sure if it is chadash or not, you have to be worried. That's the question. Well, if it's a sveik, then you can be mekel. And that's what the Bach says. It's sveik, you can be mekel. Now, in Eretz Yisrael, that sveik doesn't apply. Okay? So this is where the problem becomes a problem. I'm just saying, this is very important because, in my opinion, either there is no minig, or the fact that people are machmer on it, they're machmer on it just like they're machmer on everything else. You know, as I say all the time, we eat glad kosher pizza, right? Which that's not possible for there to be glad kosher pizza, right? Unless you have pepperoni pizza. Yeah, okay. Pepperoni and fake cheese, right? That's what you'd have to have. Okay, I'm just on that question, somebody asked me today, just mentioning this, that there's this outfit that people buy food from called Mishnah Yosef. You know what that is? Do they have that here in the city?
Different versions.
Okay. Mishnah Yosef sells tofu cheese. And somebody asked me today, can I make a tofu cheeseburger? Okay, that was a question I was asked today. Okay? And I told him I don't think so. And
Hashem gives extra on these things.
okay.
I'm just saying, it's for years it's been...
Okay, well, I'll just tell you.
There's a big pashta. There's two places, both Smash Burger, that make cheeseburgers. One is black kosher, with
Fake cheese, yeah.
and the other one is straight completely. And everybody knows it's straight, but somebody messed up in the order.
Oh, I'll just tell you a story that happened to me personally. I was in a car with Reb Tuvia Weiss, the Gaivid of Yerushalayim, and it was when he just came, and his gabbai was a Toldus Aaron guy, in full garb. And I asked him, is one allowed to eat a part of a hot dog together with a coffee? And exactly at the same time, him and his gabbai attacked me. He said, is there such a thing as a par of a hot dog? And his gabbai said, is there such a thing as a fleishiga hot dog? Right? No, it's, the stam hot dog here in Eretz Yisrael is parav, right? I think that's true. And the stam hot dog in Chutz La'aretz is fleishiks. So you have to know these. I'm just going to make this statement. I believe this is true. I think that in Eretz Yisrael, there's more parava ice cream sold than milchiks. Put it this way, I'm not 100% sure, but there definitely is way more than in Chutz La'aretz.
In any Jewish community in Chutz La'aretz, it would be the same proportion.
I don't know, I think that... all right, but I'm just saying, so that makes a big difference, if you can have your parava ice cream together with your meat. Okay.